I want to use the contextual filters model in order to explain my experience at Southwest Texas Junior College. So as you can see, here is the big picture, and then I'm going to break it into each of the parts so that you can see how it is played out over the years in teaching my Intro to Speech course. As you can see, there are three components: faculty members' background and characteristics, faculty members' views of their academic fields, and faculty members' purposes of education. As far as my background and characteristics, in my master's program at Texas State, they gave us the content, the curriculum, everything that we needed to teach an Intro to Speech course. So that's what I brought to the junior college. Now, as far as when I got there originally in 2004, the faculty members' views on academic fields, there was only one full-time speech instructor there, and he came from the field that speech communication was all about public speaking, which was different from my background, that communication or intro to communication is about the interpersonal context, the group context, and the speech context. That public speaking is just one component. Now, luckily, we got along good, so we were able to mix and match our objectives to fit what the college was expecting and still meet the curriculum. Now, so you can see how our purposes of education were different. He liked to do his work all the time, the exact same time, the exact same way. His curriculum had been the same for 20 years, and he was not about to change it. Well, I came from a more, I don't know if you want to say, a different generation of communication where I wanted to actually integrate all three contexts in communication. So I had to figure out a way to meet all of our needs so that he would be happy teaching his classes, I could be happy teaching my classes, and still the students would be able to learn. And so as other faculty members, they hired other speech instructors full-time. They were more of the current generation that I was accustomed to, so they really got on board with what I was talking about, using the same textbooks that I used, using the same kinds of activities that I used, and it really worked well for us at the time. As we move into the context, we can look at student characteristics, their goals, the factors, external influences, the literature, advice on campus, facility, opportunities and assistance, program and college goals, and other influences. So when we actually started, or when I started teaching speech, we had what was called Campus Cruiser, which is an online portal similar to Blackboard. And so I developed all of my activities to be able to be useful for the portal, but that also I could integrate face-to-face lectures, so that students would learn how to work online, but they could also work in class. Many of the characteristics that the students had were they were first generation to go to college, they were parents, non-traditional, a lot of them worked at night, had full-time jobs. So they weren't the traditional college student, and many of them were taking Intro to Speech as a requirement, not necessarily because they wanted to take it. And actually, this was the course that they dreaded taking the most because they thought it was all about public speaking. So having known that and having seen that, I had to figure out a way to make sure that they were able to understand what communication was, and then how could the college utilize their services in order to help them. So that's why I wanted to make sure that there were plenty of tutorials online for them to learn. They had the textbook that had a lot of activities, and the textbook was easy to read so that they could have that information either by ebook or in print. And then they could also, the chapters were about, I don't know, 20 pages long, so it wasn't heavy reading per week, so that they could still have their lives and still get the course done. So these are a lot of the things that influenced how my students were taking this course, how they were going to take the information, and I want to make it relevant to their lives. So a lot of the activities that I included made sure that that were, how did it relate to them as parents or as co-workers or as siblings, because if you couldn't relate speech to their lives, then they weren't going to take it as being seen useful. So those objectives actually had to match the real life situations that they were encountering. So that's how I made a lot of my activities, in and based it in real world situations. So when it came to making a course decisions, goals, content, sequence, and instruction, the administrators at the junior college really gave the faculty members free reign on how we wanted to do this. They basically said, we don't care what you do, just by the first semester, the department chairs were responsible for making the objectives consistent, made sure that there were activities in that everybody taught, that could be assessed similar, so that we could report it to the accreditation agency. So they really did give us as faculty, the rights to do whatever we wanted to. And since I was a department chair, I was able to recommend all of the content that I was doing, because everything really did fit within the goals, the content, the sequence, and the instruction. And many of the instructors were first time instructors too, so they didn't know any different, so they just kind of followed along with what I suggested, and it was a no brainer. Now, obviously, I was able to do this because in my master's program, we used that same textbook. We had developed all of the goals, we had practiced the content, the sequence, the way that we were teaching. We previously developed all of our activities, and so I was really familiar and experienced with this. So whenever I trained or whenever I gave my ideas to the rest of the speech faculty, and I said, here are the rubrics that we use, and see how they match the descriptions and see how they match the goals. They rather go along with me than to try to develop any content of their own, because this was happening at convocation and school was starting the next week. So there was no time to explore and develop anything new. So they would rather just take what I had rather than develop content on their own, which was really fine for me because it was content that I was familiar with. And so, back with the other readings that we had, we stick to what we know, because there's things that have to be due, and we had to turn it into the institution because we needed it for accreditation, and that was the year that we were getting reaffirmed. So there really was no time to plan or think. It was just a matter of, let's do it, let's evaluate it, let's put it together. We can have something on file, and we'll be done with that section, and we can get back to what we want to do, which is being in the classroom with our students. Looking back on how things played out, I start to think, was that the best way to come up with our objectives and our curriculum? And I would probably say no, but at the time, I don't think we knew any better. And as I was a first time as I was a first time full-time instructor for speech, I just did what I knew. So I fell back to the old habits that I learned at Texas State. But those were really good habits. So now, 10, 15 years later, that I'm looking at it through this lens in the doctoral program, I really think we were onto something. So I think we did get it right for the most part. Um, I knew what my background was, and I was glad that I was able to kind of convince the other faculty members that what I was doing was the right thing, because I didn't necessarily trust their background and their examples. So, luckily they went along with what I did, and pretty much that's they've been doing ever since. Even though I've left, they use a lot of the same activities. So now, as I'm coming back to being an adjunct and we're moving to a different platform such as Canvas, and I'm teaching online, I'm still trying to integrate all of those same basic activities, but in a fun, more innovative way to reach my students. And so, as I said in my last RP, that Rob had called me and asked me, do you have any rubrics? Can we use them? Because it's coming around with accreditation, and we have to make sure we have all of those things in place. I feel confident that I I can still use all of those same activities, and I've changed the rubrics a little bit to meet my online students' needs, and to also make sure we have that practical applicability to their lives. I really think that was an important piece. So it's just a matter of me now, like, documenting it officially, not necessarily just for my course, but to be able to share that with all of the other speech instructors, mainly Rob, because he's only full time, but then so that they can replicate it in all of their programs. The institution can record it for accreditation purposes, and then we can move forward and ensure that we can evaluate it year after year, but also improve it as we need to. Um, which makes me, feel good that if I ever feel like, or if I ever want to go back full time, that I can really just pick up where I left off, because it was the stuff that I invented in the first place, so it just makes it so much easier for me to do. I don't know that's gonna be the case in every institution that I go to. Let's say if I were to work for a big university, I don't know that they're gonna like my ideas and just let me do whatever I want to, but it works like that at the community college. And I kind of hate to think that we're so different than any other community colleges. They're kind of flying by the seat of their pants too. Even though we try to be more strategic, and we try to plan, and we try to do things by the book, and do things accordingly. Life happens with our students and our institutions, and we get behind, and we kind of just scramble at the last minute and try to say, done is good. um, I hope not to be in that boat anymore. I hope to take a more strategic approach to planning and curriculum development. What I think I've done so far is pretty good, and everybody else seems to agree. So, I think we'll just keep doing what we're doing until we find better ways to do that. And, you know, until that day comes, we're just gonna keep on keeping on. Thanks so much for listening.